My Informing Context project is called Dark Dwellers. I began my project photographing owners as I delivered their new cars to them. I enjoyed meeting them and hearing their brief stories with the limited time I had with them. But this did not feel like a true representation of the style of photography I wanted, or ultimately the voice I wanted to create for myself and my work. If anything, it felt too easy as I was invited into a key moment in their life, for some. My decision through inspired chats with a former student was to focus on the electric car community. This resonated with me as I had been an early EV adopter and the majority of cars that I delivered were electric company cars. I had mixed feelings with the lack of infrastructure in the UK and the government push back to all cars being electric cars to 2035, and compounded even more with the huge drop in private sales of EVs and the low residual in the second-hand electric market. Even Norway, the poster child for electric cars, is having second thoughts on electric. But I was introduced to Marnie Willett's work in one of my lectures, and the project explores the black experience of driving America, mixing the uplifting with the sinister. I was particularly drawn to Marnie's work that was shot through the windscreen of the car at night, the portraits of black people reflecting on past emotions in their cars, parked at a place where they've been racially profiled, interrogated or arrested, shows the lasting isolation and trauma they had endured. There was an apprehension and stillness in their gaze. I was inspired and wanted to reflect this in my work. My project focuses on the dwell time of EV owners and captures more intimate stories and portraits of the UK's EV community. My intent with interviews is to highlight the human condition and the time people have lost or gained, cocooned from the outside world to escape communication or to be connected through their car and phones or just passing the time at the services and beyond. Paul Graham's A1 project focused on service stations that fueled the drivers on the A1. Has been a great reference point for me, but how could I make my own stamp on that work that I photograph? His observational photography is not gritty or realist that can patronise its subject. His work has a richness that radiates and brings the characters and architecture to the fore. Many photographers seem to find a technique or approach that works for them and stick with it. Paul Graham is one of the few photographers that experiment all of the time to create new bodies of work. This curiosity and engagement with the subject matter resonates with me. Just as the night as my setting for my project, this evoked a mystery and a glow to the subjects and architecture. The abstract lights that appeared when cars' headlights and tail lights illuminate, refracting and reflecting light across the cars and subjects, and the electric tech that gave a futuristic feel to the photos. This inspired me as I started exploring the charging stations. I began with the closest and most well received at the M25 services in South Minns, with a drive-in Starbucks that was reminiscent of the artist Edward Hopper's iconic painted scenes. I also took my subjects into Starbucks for an interview. On my return, I found a smaller EV station at a BP garage near Mill Hill. Here it was inspired by one of my peers to get into the back of the car and interview a chauffeur. To the underground car parks in Westfield, West London. Here I was pleasantly surprised by the results that was helped by the neon signs and the tungsten light that gave me a more futuristic feel. And my recent, the largest EV station in the UK, located at Birmingham's NEC Centre. I was less pleased with the portraits here. The standout was the size and scale of the NEC's charging stations of 174, and capturing these liminal spaces as the night went on became my focus and has helped me to think more about my visual strategy. I've been inspired in various forms researching through my studies and wrestled with finding my identity in my photography since the beginning of the MA. One of those inspirational artists is Bill Henson, whose filmic and painterly quality got under my skin. The mystical nights and fancy quality he creates inspired me. Researching him was a revelation with his film noir references and past masters like Vermeer and Rembrandt. But it was the process he goes through that fascinated me. His sessions with his subjects unfolds over many hours. He says, you want to slow everything down until it becomes almost mesmeric. The intense concentration over such a long period immerses his subjects in the process. You don't want people to act, he says, you just want them to be. I do not have hours with the people I photograph, but as I have progressed, the importance of spending time with my subjects shines through the photos. This photo in particular, Philip, whose gaze that has created a stillness and serenity that is only captured over time. This portrait I was not happy with. I had only 5 minutes with Emma and it showed with the same expression throughout. You could feel the restlessness which made me more frantic. The importance of spending the maximum charging time with the subjects and connecting to them as they start charging is key. Nighttime and darkness convey things like dreams, fantasies and fears of the unknown. The emptiness that occurs the later the evening goes on and the calmness and trepidation in these empty liminal spaces can seem like a dream. Time seems longer as though time is still. The difficulty will be as the nights become shorter and my time becomes limited, and most importantly, people become more apprehensive of a lone shooter approaching them with very few people around. This quote resonated with me. Time exists in an order that everything doesn't happen all at once, and space exists so that it doesn't all happen to you. Susan Sontag. I want to explore these lost or gained moments in my subjects and compare the spaces within that, protect them from the outside space that for some brings fear. And as I move around my subjects at distance, circling their cars, am I like a hunter? I reflect on this. Can they see me out of the darkness as I move silently with my 80mm lens? In one of our lectures I was introduced to scopophobia and the love of looking. The term refers to the predominantly male gaze in Hollywood cinema, which enjoys objectifying women into a mere object to be looked at. My recent reading, Photography and Collaboration, focused on a collaboration with the female photographer Sophie Cowell, who hired a private detective to follow her and photograph her over the course of a day. She then also turned the lens on the detective and photographed him. This work could be seen as a reverse of the male stalker using the camera as a weapon to photograph and chain them. This feeling of the male gaze and the hunter I felt at first hand with one of my potential subjects who had agreed to initially be photographed by me, but after going inside for a coffee and returning, she did not want to be photographed, which made me reflect on how I approach the drivers, and especially female drivers alone at night. One female driver who was comfortable with me photographing her after some trepidation was Beth, who I photographed at the Westfield Shopping Centre's underground car park. She gave me enough time for her to notice me. I continued to communicate with her and share my photos with her. She told me the importance of finding a charging place that is comfortable, well lit and safe. She'd enjoyed the long journey from Paul in Dorset and her dwell time on her own away from the family to have her own space. I photographed her in the afternoon, which I'm sure made her feel less fearful, but the results need to be aligned and graded with my nighttime photos. So it's the fancy and futuristic that have directed the grading in my work. The art direction and styling from the new Blade Runner 2049 in particular, with cinematographer Chris Deakin's art direction and sublime colour palette, really inspired me. But it's the original Blade Runner which has a nostalgic relevance to me. I read Android's Dream of Sheep as a teenager, was intrigued and fascinated by the dystopian future that made me escape from my present into the fantasy land. The author Philip K. Dick's visionary approach to futuristic technology and how it affects culture and or identity inspired so many. Some give Philip K. Dick a lot of credit on reinventing, contributing and or creating the genres for future noir, tech noir and or cyberpunk. I want to bring this look and feel to my work. The underground car park in Westfield suddenly came alive with the inspired colour palettes created by cinematographer Roger Deakin and director Denis Villeneuve. I purposely underexposed and crushed the blacks, increasing the saturation to enhance the neon signs with positive results. Colour can be an incredibly powerful tool for telling subtle stories and conveying meaning. The beauty of Villeneuve's colour use is that he did this not as a stunt but to advance his story. I'd like to experiment more with this in my work to do the same. What's next? I aim to return to some of my locations to create more establishing shots and more abstract and still life images that define each location with its subject, and to have some longer trips to service stations in Oxford and Yorkshire, and hopefully some range anxiety and frustration at busy times to diverse my work. I also want to investigate over the coming months getting my work exhibited as a drive in an EV service station and have my work projected or illuminated onto billboards, and finally to look into self-publishing a book in partnership with a paper manufacturer. So what have I learned from my nighttime excursions to EV charging stations? The importance of timing, the sense of space people feel at the beginning of a charge, and how this mood changed towards the end, how to transform my relationships with the subject from that of voyeur hunter to observer friend by asking simple questions up front, and the cover of Night and how the film noir and graphic quality of the images with the deep blacks and feel like a true representation of this project, and to look at more still life and objects to put more relevance to the spaces I visit, and how to tackle the longer days and shorter nights with visits to the underground car parks. My adventures into the darkness continues.